Hello and welcome to this next part in our series on modeling the female body from BlenderCookie.com. My name is Jonathan Williamson, and in this part we're going to work to finish off the rest of the head, just kind of filling in all the gaps around the face, the top of the head, the back of the head, around the ears, and all that kind of stuff. And then hopefully we'll get a little bit into the neck area before stopping for the next part, which point we'll start tackling things like the clavicles and the shoulders. So on this part, the first thing that we want to focus on is to how to get good clean topology around the ear. And the reason that I say this is that connecting our ear to the rest of the head is notoriously difficult, and a lot of people struggle with it because we've got this much higher density topology right in here to create the ear than we do on the rest of the head. And so we've got to find a way to attach it very cleanly without causing any kinds of problems. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go and add in another background image using the image or the empty image display like we did on the front view in the previous part. And so I'm just going to select my empty here. I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate it, then right click, and then R, Z, and rotate 90 degrees around the Z axis. This way I can just use the same settings, and then I'm just going to click the folder and load in my side view. And then also, some of you may remember that in the previous part, my viewport display was painfully slow. And I realized actually, midway through doing this next part, the reason for that is because my background images were so huge that they were really slowing things down. They were over 3,000 pixels wide at the smallest point. And so they were causing, a lot of slowdown in the viewport. And so I've saved out new versions that will be included with the source files, just a smaller version of those references that we can use for doing any kind of the modeling references, but still keeping the high res as a separate file if we need it for doing things like textures and whatnot. And so now I've got good, clean, fast viewport feedback. So we need to go ahead and position this, and so I'm just going to move it over in the side view, and then I'm going to rotate about 45 degrees around, and then use this to then just scale it up to where I can see the chin just about lines up, the top of the hair lines up, and that looks pretty good. Looks like the eyes line up well. And I'm going to use this image here, as mostly just kind of a general position and reference. And you'll notice that immediately upon pulling this in, we may have some problems with our model, that the ears may be not correctly placed and things like that. But before we start panicking and trying to fix the model and do all that kind of stuff, we're going to wait until we get the head modeled, and then using what we know about anatomy, we can use that to fix the head and do anything that we need to it while comparing it to the reference images to get it close. And the reason that I say this is, with photo references, you need to be very careful because you're not able to compensate completely or accurately for the lens distortion from the camera. And so even though this may look like a perfect side-on view, it's not actually. Since there's perspective in it, you're seeing some distortion, and you're seeing the way that it would naturally be distorted, but means we need to be very careful when modeling it because what we see may not quite accurately be represented as far as how we then want it to be created. But you'll notice too that if I go into perspective mode on my model and look at it about the same angle as my photo, all of a sudden things line up pretty well. We might need to do a few things in here, but that's going to be mostly a matter of tweaking and things like that. So, leaving that where it's at for the time being, we're going to go ahead and start modeling with a focus on just the topology first. And what I want to do, selecting our head here, the goal is to then just extrude this section here several times in a loop or a circle around the back, and then connect into the ear basically like this. So then we'll get a nice clean topology going all the way around. And so we're just going to start by going in, and I'm going to position my 3D cursor right here about the center of the ear, and then I'm going to select, say, these three vertices, and then I'm going to hit period to rotate around my 3D cursor, and then I'm just going to hit E to extrude and immediately rotate, and then just rotate this straight back. And then I'm just going to do that several times, maybe straightening this out by scaling along the y-axis. And then I'll extrude again, maybe flatten it. Maybe rotate a little bit around its individual origin by hitting comma. Then I'll go back to period. I'll hit E to extrude, rotate this around. And this way I'm getting a nice even dome all the way around. Now granted, right now you'll notice that immediately I've got this very elongated dome that does not accurately represent the shape of the head. But that's okay, because now I can go in, select all these areas, I'll hit S and then Shift X so that I'm only scaling around the Y and the Z axis. I'll move that in a little bit, pull this up, maybe scale it down a little bit, and now I'm just kind of repositioning these pieces just about like this, just trying to get the basic shape of the skull and get a little closer. But by using that technique to extrude and rotate around the 3D cursor, I was able to very quickly just position my loops about where I want them, and now I can go in and tweak them further. So, right now I'm just using Alt right click to select an edge loop, and then I can use G to position it. And, just using the basic transform tools that we've been using throughout this entire series. And now that I've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select each one of these vertices, excluding this one, and I'm just going to hit E to extrude, and then S to scale, and I'm going to scale them in, about like that. Then I'll pull it down to be closer to the ear, something about like so. And then from the side view, or from the front view, I'm going to pull it out along the x-axis, something like that, until it approximately fits where the ear is. Now I'm going to go ahead and hide my references at this point because I'm not really interested in using them, because right now I'm focused just on the topology, and I really want to just get this nice and clean and let it match my form. Then I can go in and match the shape of the head and things like that. But first I'm more focused on the topology. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just selecting little bits at a time, and then just moving them around to kind of line them up approximately with how my mesh is created, such that I'm not going to get some crazy distortion or pinching when I go in and start filling in these edges. And I want to go ahead now, since I extruded this one section, I extruded it without this one so that now I can just fill in a face right here. That looks good. Maybe bring that in a little just to smooth it out. I'm just trying to avoid any pinching and things like that from the get-go. Now what I'm going to do is I want to basically, connect this all out like this. And if I make that red, you'll be able to see it more clearly. There we go. So that's kind of how I want my topology to go out and connect. Ooh, I'm going to turn off. Oh, here we go. The only endpoints. That'll make it a little easier. Okay, now getting rid of those grease pencil strokes real quick. I'm going to go ahead and start laying out a couple initial edge loops, or a couple initial edges. And what I mean by that is I'm going to start connecting ones that line up. So for example, I can see that this bottom edge and this edge in the ear line up really nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in an edge right there. And then I can go in, look around, and I see that, well, these ones line up pretty nicely. And so I can go ahead and fill in an edge there by selecting the two. And what this technique then allows me to do is to kind of see where things are working and where I need to start adding in extra edge loops to then get nice even distribution. For example, like I can see that these actually line up really nicely right there. And so I can go ahead and just fill in that entire face to start getting an idea of how this is all going to connect. That looks good. But when I do that, I can immediately see, well, I need another edge loop now to connect through here. But that's not very ideal because, I don't want to add any extra topology to the ear. I want to strictly add topology to the rest of the head because my ear is already shaped. I don't want to add any more edge loops to it. So this means I'm going to need to go ahead and remove that face and instead go ahead and slide this over in that direction, and I can now fill that right here. So that way I'm not having to add another edge there. Then I can also say, well, if that's the case, then this one here needs to connect somewhere in here, but maybe I could get away with connecting it here and then removing this edge loop. So let's go ahead and remove it. So I'll hit X and delete the edge loop, and then I can just kind of move these over to compensate for where that edge loop was. So maybe I'll select this one with Alt right click, I'll hit Control E, edge slide, bring it over a little, slide it up, just reform the shape that I had, and this then allows me to fill in a quad right there. Okay, so that works. And then let's go on down the bottom, and I can see that this is going to work well there, but okay, I'm going to need one more edge loop, so I'll add in another one right there. Maybe I'll then slide this one along just to compensate for that distance. Make sure everything is nice and evenly distributed, so that I don't have, say, one edge loop really close and then one really far away. I want to keep things nice and evenly spaced. Okay, I can fill in those. That then allows me to fill that one there, and I'm making good progress. Maybe slide these out a little so there's less pinching in here. Maybe I'll smooth these a bit. You can select them, hit W, and smooth. Just trying to, again, make sure that I don't have any weird pinching or anything like that on my model. Okay, so that's looking good. Let's go ahead and move on to the front here. And the front is actually notoriously the most difficult portion because we've got to try and connect things with slightly different topology. So what I'm going to do is first I want to try and connect this area right in here. But we've got this problem here that we're trying to close off this portion of the ear as well. And so this piece right here actually needs to connect, say, right there. So we're just going to go ahead and do that because we know that we've got this open-ended edge. So it then needs to connect somewhere out like that. But I'm not going to connect that just yet because most likely I'm going to need to add in another edge loop here. So I'm going to wait just a moment and try and fill in this space first. And an easy way to do that sometimes is to turn off your mirror modifier while in edit mode just by clicking this button. This way you can see on the inside of the head, and we can maybe go in and see, okay, well, we could just fill these together. So maybe we'll take this, fill that, which helps kind of close that off. But there's not really a divot here. This is generally a kind of smooth transition over. So we need to then just smooth these up a little bit, make that a little smoother. And then we can see that, well, if we're going to add in this last bit, we need to add in just a little bit more either topology in here or restructure how this is created. And I'm leaning towards restructuring how this little bit ends up. So I'm going to go ahead and remove what I did here. And instead what I want to do is to go ahead and bring another vertex down like this, which then allows me to fill in this a bit further, which means I need to remove that edge. And now what I can do is say I can merge these two vertices. So I'll select them, hit W, and merge at center. And that helps terminate some of those edge loops right through here around the back of the ear. And then maybe I can do that again by, well, actually, I don't really want to come down any further because the ear, it really connects to the head right about here. And so I'm not going to come down any further, but I can bring these up. And now the goal then is to fill this in smoothly somehow, which is always, I always actually find this to be one of the most difficult points on the ear to attach. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these, and from the side view, I'm going to hit E to extrude, then rotate them out a little bit, something like this. And then I want to connect this right here. And that will help get that fairly nice and smooth. So I can actually bring this out here. This can then connect up here. And a lot of this portion of the ear is really, I hate to say it, but it's a lot of trial and error in terms of finding what works and what doesn't, depending on your model, and depending on the complexity of your ear. This is one part of the model where I tend to do a little bit differently every single time, simply because, one model may be more complex than the next, and so it requires different topology right in this area to get it to work well. So there I can kind of continue this face loop around like this to kind of help continue terminating some of those areas. Then I can go ahead, smooth this out a little, smooth this out a little, and bring that out a little there. I can maybe go ahead and bring this up, fill, oops, nope. Let me undo that. I'll smooth this a couple times by hitting W and smooth, and still not gonna play nice there. There we go. Now that filled evenly. So I can kind of help shape some of that a bit better. I can go ahead and say bring out these three edges and then fill in this. And since I've got a nice kind of point here, I could go ahead and merge these three by hitting W, merge at center, and then fill that quad to a single triangle. And maybe I could actually even go ahead and merge these two together such that this continues a nice even edge loop. So, now I've got a line of faces going in through there and a line going in through there rather than having that weird kind of diamond there in the center. Okay. That looks pretty good. Some of these areas are poking out weird, so I'll bring them in. Okay, let's go ahead and I'm going to bring these down just a bit, something like this. And let's start connecting this. I like where this edge is pointing, and so it's basically going straight in this direction. So what I'm going to do is add another edge loop right here, something like that. I'll connect that, and I'll connect that. And what I like to do by connecting these edges, it's kind of laying out my groundwork as far as where I want things to go and how I want it to be shaped. And so now that I've done that, I can kind of say, okay, well now I just need to get the topology to work to go in that direction. And same thing here, like maybe I want this to come out like so, then I can bring this right up through there, and now I've got this nice loop that's going around like this, but this loop is also going straight through here and through here. So that works really nice and clean, kind of helps form the general shape of the head too. And so now I want to just continue this on down. So maybe I'll start by adding another edge loop in here. I'll fill that right there, which means I'm going to need another one in here, which I don't necessarily want to do just yet. So I'm also going to fill one right there. And then here at the bottom of the ear, let's take a look at her earlobes real quick. And she's got kind of detached earlobes, and so maybe we need to add in another piece to it. So I'll hide everything else again. And then what I want to do by adding in that extra piece, what I mean is I want to, oops, let me hide this as well. I basically want to fill in a face like that. So this just attaches the earlobe a little further up, means I don't have to connect this directly to the head, and helps give me a little better shape. So this means I need another edge right in here. So I'll add in a loop. Again, loop is just Control R. Select all four, hit F to fill in that edge or face. Okay. That looks good. And on this part, this maybe needs to come in a bit. And we can do any cleanup work that we need to while connecting things here in just a little bit. But I can see that I've got two edge loop, or a total of 6 vertices here. So that's going to work really nicely if I just use a little technique to add in some extra topology. And the technique I can use is just to extrude this edge straight out like this. Maybe scale it down a little. And then I can select these 4, fill a face. These 4, fill a face. And then these 4 and fill a face. And so using that, I've quickly just added in extra topology, or basically 2 extra loops right in here. And then I just need to smooth out that area. So this is a good time to select all these, just hit W and smooth. Make sure that's a good even transition between that topology. That looks good. Okay. Maybe I'll bring this down, put that in. Make sure I don't have any weird pinching. And I can add in another loop here after all. Maybe slide this one up. Connect that. And connect that. Okay, that gives me a pretty good clean topology. Maybe I'll now select these, smooth them a little. I'd like to go ahead and bring these back towards the ear a little bit just to help. Since I've got this curve here, I want to really just kind of isolate the topology a little bit more. Bring it in closer to the ear. There we go. Select all these, hit W, smooth a few times. And then I can see this is going to connect just like this. This then will connect roughly like that. And now I can go ahead and start kind of filling in how things are going to work. So I can say that, okay, this is probably going to connect somewhere back in here, but these also need to connect all the way up here. So I'm going to start by just bringing these straight back here. Something like this. I'll go and add in another edge loop here. Flatten it out. Connect all that. And we're going to have a fair bit of smoothing work to do shortly after this, but we can wait until we start getting everything kind of put together and see how it's all going to work. I'm going to go ahead and extrude this, bring it out here, add another edge loop here, then merge these together. That just helps kind of spread out the topology, which then allows me to go ahead and take this straight down like that. So removing that grease pencil stroke, I'll add in another loop right here, fill that. And again, that kind of helps me get the shape of the cheekbones. This is kind of a hollow area right in here as far as the muscles. That's why you tend to see people that are thinner or else unfortunately not getting enough nutrition, things like that. They have very sunken cheeks. That's from the you've got the underlying bone here, and this is all kind of muscle tissue right in here. You've got your jawbone, stuff like that, and so we want to get that kind of hollow form in there, and using the topology by having this angle go up through here and then also go this way allows us to get that piece. Okay, and now I want to go ahead and work on this a bit more. Let's go ahead and I'm going to add in another edge loop here, which then allows me to slide this back to even it out. And I want to just fill this, followed by adding an edge loop there to then merge these together, just so this is continuous. And then I can see that I can add in an edge loop here, but I'm going to need to add one more up all the way through to the eye. So I'll go ahead and add that, and then I'll slide these over. Slide that a little. Slide that a little bit. Then I'm going to select all of this area. I'm going to hit W and smooth a few times. Just make sure it's nice and even. Make sure I haven't caused any problems on my eye. Maybe I'll just pull these down just a little bit. Pull that down just a little. Okay, that looks good. I can go ahead and select these areas, and I'm going to bring them back as well. Back like this. Go into edge mode, fill that, fill that, fill that, and fill that. And then, obviously we can see that we've got some problems right here, so we'll bring these out. Oops. Okay. We can go ahead and bring this edge back a bit like this. And we'll smooth these. This is definitely a time where your smooth tool comes in handy. More than anything, not so much to work with the form, but to smooth out any of your topology concerns that you may have. Make sure everything's nice and smooth. When you've got good smooth topology, it helps you kind of visualize how your mesh is constructed first, and then you can work a little bit more on actually creating, the forms that under, the muscle forms and things like that once you have that topology in place. But until you have that topology in place, it's a little more difficult. And so I like to say that the topology comes first, and then you can work on the forms, because your topology in many ways can define those forms. Okay. Bring that out. And that starts to look pretty good, but now I need to bring these up through here. So I'm going to take these, I'm going to slide it back, slide this back, take these, bring them all the way back up here, these all the way back here. Just kind of evening things out, and then I can go ahead and start working to fill in this area. And the way I'm going to do is I'm going to select all this, and I'm just going to extrude. Then I can fill this. I could go ahead and probably merge some of these down, so maybe I'll select these three, W, and merge at center, bring them in. Fill that into a quad. Okay, maybe I will slide some of these along here. I can say, well, let's go and add in, say, 2 edge loops around here. We'll hit Alt-S to smooth it out. Then I can connect that there, and that there. Then this right here, and that like so. But with this one, I'm going to go ahead and slide this along here. Control-E, edge slide, bring it out. That looks good. I can add in another edge loop here, smooth this out. Then I will go in, connect that. Add an edge loop there, smooth it out, connect it, and then select all this, W, and smooth. And then obviously you can see we've got some shaping that we need to do, but you can see it's starting to come together actually. And so first let's just get rid of any kind of weird pinching and things like that we have. Maybe on these areas. I'll select this, Control-E, edge slide, Alt-S just a little bit to make sure it's nice and rounded still. Okay, that looks pretty good. Smooth that a few times. And that's all looking pretty nice and clean, but now we need to work on our forms. So first let's go ahead and work on the brow. On the brow we want to get, we've got the eye socket through here, and then we've got this, the underlying skull shape coming up through there. Let's go ahead and remove the endpoints. I'll draw a little cleaner. So we've got, this shape coming up, this shape coming up, got the underlying eye socket. And so we want to try and get some of this form, coming up through there. We can get rid of some of these strokes while we're doing this. So we'll bring these out. We don't want our brows to be crazy strong like that. So we'll bring some of that back out. And now is a good time to bring our reference images back. So we'll hide that, and now we can work with the general shape. Now is also a good time to turn on your proportional editing tool by pressing O, and then you can just kind of work in sections. Makes it a little bit easier to get the shape that you want. There we go. And right here, it's really just a matter of tweaking your form and getting something that you're happy with. Maybe bring that in a little bit. Bring her jawbone back. We will go ahead and bring the bottom of her chin up just a little bit. Okay, bring her cheeks in just a bit, and her cheekbones out just a little. And so here you can start to see, it's really just a matter of tweaking your shape. And now that we've got all the topology in, we can really just kind of do what we want. Maybe I'll bring this line back a little bit more. And so to me, this is actually the fun part, because you start seeing your entire head really come together. Add a little bit more curve to the lips there. Okay, now what I want to do before we do anything else is I'm going to go and hit select the head and the eyes, and then I'm going to hit Shift H and go into perspective mode by hitting 5, so that we can really start to take a look at things with perspective on. This is one thing that you really need to do throughout your entire modeling process, is take a look at how things look in perspective. And in this case, I'll turn the mirror modifier back on, because in reality we see everything in perspective. And so modeling a head in an orthographic view is actually very unnatural. It seems a lot easier because we get to model it as if it's a blueprint, and we don't have to worry about distortion and things like that. But in reality, it doesn't actually work that way, because we need to see exactly how things are looking in in perspective, or else it's never going to look natural. That actually seems like things are looking fairly good. And keep in mind, with this tutorial at the moment, our goal is not to make a perfect likeness to our reference image. Really, we're using the reference as a way of helping to understand a woman's head versus just trying to recreate that head. I think it's far more important to be able to model a general head than it is, or at least initially, than it is to be able to recreate someone exactly as they are. Because there's so many different anatomy things that have to come into play with any head that you need to learn and master before you can ever even model, someone that actually exists. Because to model someone that actually exists, you've got to know all these different anatomy things. You've got to know the proportions of the head and the shapes of the head, and then you can apply that knowledge to how to actually model the real person. Now, one thing that we do have right now that's a problem is there's actually kind of a pivot or a divot right here that's formed something like this. And right now we don't really have that. It's just a straight line going back. And so we need to bring that in. So I'm going to select, say, these edges here. I'm going to bring them in just a little bit. Maybe deselect the back ones, bring these in a bit more. And then I'm going to bring these down. Bring these up a bit. There we go. That starts to look a little bit better. Might have made it too strong in some places. Okay, this is starting to look pretty good. Now, before we move on, we're almost done with this section, and we're not going to get to the neck or anything like that today. But one thing that I want to do now, before looking at our reference or anything else like that, is I want to go in and check our model based on the anatomy rules that we know. So, a couple, for example. One is that I'm going to do this by creating a cube. So, first off, let's just hit Shift A and add a cube at the center of the head, and then we're going to scale this down to roughly the size of the head, something about like this. And then we can position it on the top and bottom. So first off, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this into strictly, by going over to the object buttons, I'm going to set this to be strictly a wireframe. And so now we can just see it, and we'll position it right about there. Okay, so first of all, the eyes should be exactly in the center of the head, which they're not. So let's go ahead. And also, underneath the display, I'm going to enable all edges. There we go. So let's go ahead and fix that. So we can select our eyes here. I'm going to turn on proportional editing, and then I'm going to then just bring the entire eye set down. Something about like that. Okay, let's now reposition our eyeballs here. Next, we know that the entire head from here to here should be 5 eyes wide. So let's go ahead and scale down our cube to be the width of the head. Okay, and we're going to then add in 4 edge loops, just like this. And we should now have one eye from here to here, one eye from here to here, and here to here, which we don't. So let's go ahead, we'll take our eyes, bring them in, scale them in along the x-axis a bit. Okay, that ought to be close enough, which means we need to scale these in a little. Bring them in. That looks good. Okay, much better. And we should really notice this when we go into perspective. All of a sudden, things feel a bit more natural. You notice it looks a little weird. They seem too close together when looking at it in orthographic view. But if you switch into perspective, all of a sudden, it starts to work. Okay, and we can fudge this a little bit, bring these in slightly closer if you wanted. Okay, next is from the apologies for the little mix up there, had a recording glitch. But then from the halfway point, so if we take the eyes at about the halfway point, and this obviously there's going to be a little bit of variation through anyone's head, but these are general rules of thumb that as long as you follow them approximately, then you'll get pretty darn close. But from the halfway point starting here, if we then cut this in half yet again, then this should be about the top of the lips. And so this is perhaps a little bit too low. So then we can bring the mouth up just a little bit. And then, we can bring the nose down just a little bit from there. We can maybe fix our nose here now that we've kind of messed it up a bit. Okay, then, you'll notice that obviously we're causing a few problems here, but then also from the edge of the nostril should be equal to the edge of the eyes here. And so right now our nostrils are too wide, so we'll bring those in. Next, the corners of the mouth should be equal to about the sides of the pupil. And so that's actually pretty close. Maybe we can bring them in just a little bit further, about like that. And then also the top of the ear should line up with the top of the eye or about the brow, and the bottom of the ear should line up about with the bottom of the nose. So currently, maybe our ear is a little bit too high, so we'll bring it down about like that. Okay. And then at this point, what I'm going to recommend is, since we've kind of messed things up a little bit, or at least now, she may be accurately proportioned, but she looks pretty goofy now, is now we can go ahead, bring back our reference images. I'll hide that one and hide the big camera. Now we can go ahead and do some tweaking again to kind of smooth things out. Maybe we'll even select some of these areas, just smooth them a bit. Can bring this out here a little, this out like this. Okay. Start tweaking these general shapes, but staying within the basic proportions that we've now set in place. Our eyes are maybe a little too big at the moment. Rotate that all around like this, bring the bottom eyelid in just a bit more. Kind of switch into perspective mode, get a good feeling of how things are. Maybe select this whole general area, and we can just smooth it a bit. Same thing maybe with all this. Maybe we'll turn down the transparency on these just a little bit more so we can kind of see through them a bit. Okay. Bring down the corners of the lips a little bit. I can do some tweaking without my proportional editing to fix up and clean up the lips just a bit. Right now there's some parts that are maybe a little wonky. Maybe I can slide these up. The bottom lip is really just very nice and smooth, within just a kind of a sharp ridge there at the center line of it. There we go. Immediately that looks a lot better. Bring down the center there just a bit. And so, now I'm really just doing a little bit of tweaking here and there, just to where I feel things are maybe a little off, or, doing my proportion tweaking. I got a little bit of rough. That's one thing with the proportion tweaking. Really, we should have done that earlier, but we didn't. And so, now we kind of pay for a little bit by having to do a little extra cleanup work here. We can give a hint of this shape right in here that everyone has by the chin and then the muscles underneath the mouth. Just, it's not generally as pronounced on women as it is on men, and so we want to make it fairly subtle, but giving a hint of it in the topology can really help towards, that subtle realism. Okay, let's take a look at our model without the modeling sheets again. Maybe we can get rid of this thing as well. Switch into perspective mode. And it's not looking too bad. We can feel there's definitely a few rough spots here and there, but some of that will even out as we continue our tweaking. The main thing that I'm feeling right now is that the lips are perhaps a bit too, or maybe it's the expression that's throwing me off. Let's kind of round out her bottom lip just a bit, get it a little fuller. Definitely one of the keys to getting a feminine character. Since we are modeling a female face right now, one of the keys is definitely the lips. Men have much slimmer, kind of, I guess, compressed lips. Women tend to have more voluptuous lips. And so that's definitely one thing that helps, but then also the jawline is huge. Not in that women have big jawlines, but it's very important. Women have much softer jawlines like this, whereas men tend to have much more angular jawlines. And so we want to be sure that we help kind of give that impression. And just doing subtle tweaks, like pulling this out just a little bit to get this really nice look right like that, can make a huge difference. My apologies for the relatively boring tweaking, but this is definitely one of those necessary steps that, I could go ahead and time-lapse through, which, some of you would probably enjoy, but then others of you would want to see all this tweaking, and so I try to make an effort to show the majority of my tweaking in real time, particularly just, things like this, where we have these muscle shapes and then these muscle shapes, and where they meet is this pole right here. And so currently that was a little low on mine, and so now I've raised it up, and you can actually see that shape, on our reference there in the shadows. that's a really key point where we have this pole positioned right about there, because then we get this very natural topology that we can then accent by, I can pull this further back and this further back, and it will just kind of give me that natural feeling of those muscles. And if I were to do that, time-lapsed, you wouldn't have gotten that. And, that's not to say that, you wouldn't have figured that out on your own or that you wouldn't know this, but just, one of the reasons that I do like to do this all in real time, particularly because that was not something that was planned. That was just something that I came across as I got to it. I realized that it was a little too low, so I raised it up, and immediately it helped get me a more natural feeling. And particularly, you can notice we've now got these nice shadows coming down like this that are giving us that natural shape of the face that we want. And so, one thing I definitely encourage is watch the shadows on your model, because they definitely help give hints to how things are working and whether or not they're accurately shaped how they should be. And I'm almost done here. I'm not going to do too much more of this. Even though I say I like to do it all in real time, I do know that it is tedious, and some of you could very well be bored out of your minds right now, but luckily that's why we have fast forward. And as long as you stop every now and then, double check that you aren't missing anything, you should be good to go. Okay, I think we're going to just about call that it. Let's go ahead and take a look. Let's hide this, hide our references, take a look at this. Some of these areas I feel are a little wonky still, so I'm just going to smooth them out. I'm going to maybe take these, just smooth them just a little. Okay. Maybe bring these up just a little bit. Get that arch right in there. Got a little bit more volume to the eyes there. Make sure I'm not causing any weird pinches or anything like that. Looks fairly good, except for maybe this little spot. This little spot, maybe I'll grab these and smooth them with my favorite smooth tool. Okay, that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll still bring this up even a little further. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of one of these edge loops. I really feel like this is just a little too dense right here and I don't need it. So I'm going to select this one, hit X, delete that edge loop, and then I can kind of smooth this one out just a little. I'll take this up a bit, and I'll take this one up a bit. I can maybe take these back. There we go. It just felt like there was a little too much going on there, and it was tending to just, cause me problems or more problems than it was solving having them. Okay, bring in that little bit of the nose there. I'm going to check the nostrils real quick. They feel a little funky to me right now. So just doing some tweaking, going again. We've got one ball and another ball, and those two then form that shape. This then is kind of where those balls meet. And I feel like something is definitely off with her profile. Just bring these in a little bit. There we go. That helps. And then the shape of her nose is definitely off. I definitely kind of distorted it. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Maybe grab this area, we'll smooth it a few times. Maybe bring the forehead out just a bit. And I think that is going to pretty much do it. Hide all that. Take a look. And that is looking pretty good, I think. You know, one thing to keep in mind too that is very surprising but is definitely true is how weird people look without their, or how different they look without their eyebrows and such. And so, you know, you could spend forever just tweaking this model and tweaking the model and tweaking the model, and it just, something doesn't feel right. If you were to then just immediately, you know, throw on some basic eyebrows, and of course, you know, those are very poor eyebrows, plus some eyelashes, you'd be amazed at how quickly things start to come together and look a lot better. And then, you know, also if you then proceed to throw in hair, things start to just come together. And, you know, this is a poor representation of hair as I draw with my mouse, but it definitely kind of something to think about, that immediately, you know, even with that, you can start to see, oh wow, it actually kind of looks like a woman, and it just starts to work. So if you're not feeling your model and you feel like something's just not working, feeling really weird, and just all in all doesn't feel right, try throwing some basic eyebrows and eyelashes and basic hair in there, and immediately you'll probably see things start coming together and it will start to work. So with that, I'm going to stop my ranting, stop my tweaking, and let you be, and I'll see you on the next part.